Hi, Central Denison. This is Mrs. Corna. I'm just hanging out on my deck today, reading some books, and I'd like to share this one with you. This is called The Best Mouse Cookie, and it's written by Laura Numeroff and Felicia Bond. And Laura Numeroff wrote the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. It's the same character. Let's take a look inside. This is a fiction story. The Best Mouse Cookie. Mouse has everything he needs to make cookies. He adds flour, salt, and a little music. Mouse thinks baking is easy. Sometimes. The bigger the drop, the louder the plop. Now Mouse needs a little nap. He makes himself comfortable. A little too comfortable. Uh-oh. Oh well, Mouse doesn't mind starting over. There's no such thing as too many cookies. But the best cookie is the one you share with a friend. Just ask Mouse. I have a cookie recipe that I'd like to share with you, my friends. This is the chocolate chip cookie recipe that I used to make cookies for the 2 classes that were winners in the accuracy challenge of our AR reading challenge that we completed this spring. Just don't tell Mr. Haywood that you have the recipe. Let's go inside and put on our aprons. Here are the tools you'll need for making chocolate chip cookies. First, you'll need a measuring cup. You'll also need a measuring teaspoon and a measuring tablespoon. You could use a whisk for mixing up your dry ingredients if you'd like to, but it's not required. You could use a spoon for the same thing. You'll need a small bowl for mixing your dry ingredients, and you'll need a large bowl for mixing your wet ingredients. It needs to be large because you'll be adding the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. You might do all of your mixing with a spoon, but if you have a hand mixer and it's okay with your parents, you could do the mixing with a hand mixer. I like to use a big mixer like this when I make cookies, but you would definitely need your parents' permission before you start mixing with a big mixer. After you have your dough mixed and you're ready to bake, you'll need a cookie sheet for baking your cookies. I like to line my cookie sheets with parchment paper. It makes it so they don't stick, and it's really easy to slide them off onto a cooling rack. You'll need a cooling rack like this, or I have a giant cooling rack too. To make chocolate chip cookies, you'll need flour, cornstarch, baking soda, and salt. You'll also need butter, sugar, brown sugar, vanilla, 2 eggs, and a bag of chocolate chips. They could be milk chocolate chips or semi-sweet chocolate chips, or you could even cut up some Hershey bars instead of using chocolate chips. First, we're going to mix the dry ingredients in the small size bowl. We'll start with 2 cups of flour. There's 1. Here's the 2nd cup of flour. And then we need 2 tablespoons more of flour. So there's 1, and here's 2. Then we need a teaspoon of baking soda. Here's the teaspoon of baking soda. And we need 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. There's 1, and here's 2. The other dry ingredient we need to add is 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So we'll put 3/4 in our teaspoon measure, and we'll add that. Next, we're going to combine these ingredients together. You could use a spoon, but it's kind of fun to combine them with a wire whisk. And now we'll set these dry ingredients to the side while we get our wet ingredients combined. Now I've added 3/4 cup of butter, which is 1 1/2 sticks of butter, into the bowl. I'm going to take them to the microwave and melt them. Now that the butter's melted, we're going to add the sugar. We're going to add 1 cup of brown sugar that's lightly packed. And we're also going to add 1/2 cup of white sugar. And now we'll use the mixer and mix these together until they're well blended and smooth. Now that the butter and sugars are nicely combined, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. There's 1 and 2. We're going to give it a really short mix. There we go. And now we're going to add a whole egg. So we just crack the egg and add it. And then we also need an egg yolk. So the egg yolk is the yellow part of the egg. We're going to save the egg white for something else. There's different ways to separate the egg yolk from the egg whites. The way that we're going to do it is crack the egg on the edge of the bowl here, and we're going to split it into 2 parts. We're going to cradle the egg yolk on one side of the shell and let the egg whites fall into the bowl. And we'll go back and forth a couple times, trying to get as much of the egg white off as we can. And now we'll put that yolk in to be mixed with the rest of our wet ingredients. We'll save the egg white for something else. Now we're going to mix with the mixer again till they're well combined. Now we're ready to add our dry ingredients. So we'll add part of the dry ingredients and we're going to mix, but we don't want to over mix this. And now we're going to stop and add some more of our dry ingredients. And we'll mix again. Before it looks like the flour is completely combined, we're going to add our bag of chocolate chips. Now some people like to stir these in by hand, but I'm going to go for it and mix it with the hand mixer. Now that the dough is completely mixed, the dough needs to be refrigerated. This is one step that's a little bit different than a lot of other chocolate chip cookie recipes, but I think it's one of the secrets to making really good chocolate chip cookies. Now you could just cover the bowl with plastic wrap like this and put it into the refrigerator for 2 hours or overnight. Or I like to scoop them while the dough is still sticky like this into big balls like this and put it into a pan lined with plastic wrap to put in the refrigerator. Then when I'm ready to bake, all I have to do is put them on the tray and they'll be ready to go into the oven. After the dough has refrigerated for 2 hours or overnight, you're ready to bake your cookies. You'll take a cookie sheet and line it with parchment paper. If you don't have parchment paper, that's okay. Don't grease the cookie sheet, just bake it right on the cookie sheet, but in between batches, wash off the cookie sheet. You'll take your dough balls and place them on the cookie sheet and flatten them with your hand just a little bit. This. I don't like to have my cookies too crowded on the cookie sheet. And when I made them for the AR celebration, I knew those kids worked really hard, so they needed big cookies. So I like to make nice big chocolate chip cookies. Now this pan is ready to go into the oven. It goes into an oven that's preheated to 350 degrees for 12 to 14 minutes. The length of time that it needs to bake will depend on the oven you have. So set a timer for 12 minutes and start checking at 12 minutes. So this pan of cookies was just removed from the oven. They baked for 13 minutes. You can let them sit on the cookie sheet for 2 to 3 minutes to firm up a little bit, and then slide them right off onto a cooling rack. Let them cool before you store them. They should be stored in a tightly sealed container. They can also be frozen. So if you make these chocolate chip cookies, there's a pretty good chance that Mr. Haywood is going to show up at your house because he loves these cookies. But if Mr. Haywood shows up at your house, he'll probably bring some milk to go with the cookies. Let's give him a try. Those are delicious. If you liked the Best Mouse cookie, you might like to read The Cookie Fiasco.